I think there's a great push for corporate tax transparency at the moment. Investors are really keen to see companies moving away from unsustainable tax practices and taking on responsible tax practices. And in that drive, they want companies to produce a tax policy, articulate their approach around risks that they face, and also publish granular quantitative reporting that will be beneficial for investors to evaluate tax risks and opportunities and make investment decisions accordingly. There are some sectors that are leaders and some that have a long way to go. At the moment, we're working on a project with a group of investors looking at corporate tax transparency. We have about 35 institutional investors representing 2.9 trillion in assets under management who will be raising questions with healthcare and technology companies about their approach to tax. And we've seen that these sectors are not progressive in terms of the information that they're putting out, but they are faced with multiple sector-related risks. For example, in relation to the way they manage intellectual property and move it around from high tax jurisdictions to low tax jurisdictions. There's also a tendency to use intra-group transactions or their lack of physical presence to minimize taxes and therefore increase profits. Although this may appear to some to be an appropriate strategy, it does create significant risks for investors, which could translate into earnings risks as well. So this is an issue that is considerably important for investors. We are seeing some changes though in relation to regulatory framework. So for example, in relation to the UK Finance Act, we're beginning to see companies produce quite detailed tax policies, but again, the level of information being provided by different companies is different, and we want to see that move forward with more organisation-specific and detailed information being provided. Certain regulatory loopholes that companies have traditionally relied on is no longer available for companies like, say, Facebook and Google, who have relied on tax strategies such as the double Irish structure. There is a change there, and we're seeing companies acknowledge that. For example, Facebook came out with an announcement in December 2017, I think, that they're going to change the way they recognise revenue. Instead of channeling it to Ireland, they will be recognising it at local levels in the EU. And that's a big change. That's an operational change, and it wouldn't have been possible without the regulatory pressure as well as the stakeholder scrutiny here. I think a lot of investors are extremely concerned about companies contributing to economic inequality, and aggressive tax planning practices erode tax bases of countries where they're operating, and eventually stymie economic growth and development. So it is important for investors particularly to raise this issue with companies going forward.